The crystal champagne flutes clinked together like brittle, expensive wind chimes, a sound that was completely alien to my world. The ballroom at the city's most exclusive country club was a fantasy of shimmering gold light and white roses. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their music a tasteful, expensive murmur, beneath the polite laughter of the city's elite. The air smelled of money, of perfume, of the thousands of white roses I had paid for. Every detail, from the hand-calligraphed place cards to the towering, 7-tiered wedding cake, had been chosen by my daughter, Chloe. And every detail had been paid for by me. It was the wedding of her dreams, a fairy tale she had spun, and I, her loving mother, had footed the bill for every last, extravagant piece of it. It was my life's savings, the fruits of 40 years of hard work, all coalesced into this one, perfect, glittering evening. I stood by the entrance, my heart swelling with a mother's pride, watching my daughter, my whole world, greet her guests. She was a vision in a dress that cost more than my first car, her hand resting on the arm of her handsome new husband, a boy from a family whose name was synonymous with old money and quiet power. I waited, smiling, for her to come and take me to my seat, to the place of honor at the head table, where the mother of the bride belonged. She came to me eventually, her smile a bright, brittle, and practiced thing. "Mom," she said, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "You look nice." Her eyes did a quick, dismissive scan of my simple, elegant, but decidedly off-the-rack silk dress. "Come on, let me show you to your seat." She took my arm, her grip surprisingly firm, almost proprietary, and she began to lead me. We walked past the head table, where the groom's parents were holding court, their faces alight with patrician pride. We walked past the tables of her new important friends, their jewels glittering in the candlelight. We walked past the towering wedding cake, past the dance floor, past the string quartet. We walked to the farthest, darkest corner of the vast ballroom, a forgotten territory of shadow and utility. She stopped at a small, wobbly, unadorned table, a table set for one. It was tucked behind a large potted palm tree, a sad, lonely island in a sea of celebration, and it was positioned directly next to the swinging, double-doored service entrance to the kitchen, and, beside it, 2 enormous gray, industrial-sized trash cans, already beginning to overflow with discarded champagne bottles and the debris of the cocktail hour. The warm floral scent of the ballroom was replaced, in this forgotten corner, by the sour, metallic smell of garbage. "Here you go, Mom," Chloe whispered, her perfect smile never reaching her cold, hard eyes. "You'll be out of the way here. You can just relax." Out of the way. The words, and the sour smell of the trash, hit me with the force of a physical blow. I looked at the table. My table. The table for the woman who had funded this entire fantasy. It was an afterthought. A problem to be hidden. I was not the mother of the bride. I was a piece of embarrassing, inconvenient luggage to be checked in the back room. I looked at my daughter, at her beautiful, cruel face, and in that moment, the 50 years of unconditional love, of boundless sacrifice, of putting her happiness above my own, it all just died. It withered and turned to ash, leaving behind something I had not felt in a very, very long time. A cold, quiet, and utterly methodical rage. But I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not make a scene. I simply smiled. A quiet, sad, and deeply, deeply dangerous smile. "Thank you, my darling," I said, my voice as smooth as silk. "This is perfect." She looked relieved. She thought I had accepted my fate. She thought I was the same soft, accommodating mother I had always been. She patted my arm, a final dismissive gesture, and then she turned and glided back into the light, back to her new important life, leaving me in the shadows, next to the garbage. She thought she had hidden me. She had no idea that she had just made the single greatest, most catastrophic mistake of her life. Because she had not just put me in the corner. She had put me next to a discreetly placed landline telephone on the wall of the service station. And in my handbag, I had my checkbook. And I had a folder containing the contracts, and the receipts for every single vendor at this wedding, the caterer, the florist, the band, the open bar, all of whom were still awaiting their final payment. A final payment that was due by contract at precisely 9 p.m., an hour from now. Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Beatrice. I'm 69 years old. And on my daughter's wedding day, the fairy tale wedding I paid for with every penny I had in the world, my seat was next to the trash. The secret I am sharing with you today is not about a hidden will or a long-lost fortune. The secret is much simpler than that. The secret is that I am the one with the checkbook. You see, my daughter believed that the hundreds of thousands of dollars I had poured into her dream wedding was a gift, a simple bank transfer, an irrevocable fact. She had forgotten the most basic rule of business, a rule I had learned over 40 years of building my own successful bakery from the ground up. He who pays the piper calls the tune. And I was about to call up the piper and tell him to play a funeral dirge. So please, get comfortable. This is not a story about a mother's heartbreak. It is the story of a mother's revenge. A swift, precise, and utterly devastating revenge, served not cold, but in the middle of a glittering, 5-star wedding reception. Your support, your likes and subscriptions to Silent Grandma, are my own private toast to a bill that was about to come due. To understand how a daughter could seat her own mother, the woman who was funding her entire fairy tale, next to the trash cans, you have to understand the princess I so lovingly and so foolishly raised. You have to understand the lifetime I spent teaching her that my love and my wallet were a bottomless, unconditional resource. My story is not one of old money. It is a story of flour-dusted hands and 4 a.m. mornings. For 40 years, I was the owner of Beatrice's Bakery, a small beloved institution in our town. I had started it with my late husband, George, a man with a brilliant smile and a terrible head for business. He was the heart of the bakery. I was its spine. He charmed the customers, and I managed the books. After he passed away from a heart attack far too young, I was left alone with a 10-year-old daughter, a small, struggling business, and a mountain of his charmingly accrued debt. Those were the lean years. The years I learned the brutal, unforgiving language of spreadsheets and profit margins. I worked 18-hour days. My hands were perpetually chapped, my back a constant, dull ache. But I was a good baker, and I was a better businesswoman. I turned that struggling little shop into a local empire. I expanded. I hired more staff. Beatrice Bakery became the place you went for your wedding cake, your birthday cupcakes, your daily loaf of sourdough. I was respected. I was successful. And I was determined that my daughter, my Chloe, would never know the fear and the exhaustion that had been my constant companions. And so, I spoiled her. I admit it. I overcompensated. I wrapped her in a cocoon of material comfort, a shield to protect her from the harsh realities of the world I was fighting every day. While I was wearing flour-dusted aprons and worrying about the rising cost of butter, she was taking ballet lessons, horseback riding lessons, French lessons. She wanted a designer prom dress. I took an extra shift to pay for it. She wanted a brand new car for her 18th birthday. I took out a business loan to buy it for her. She wanted to go to an expensive, out-of-state private college to study art history. I sold a piece of the commercial property I had invested in to pay the tuition. Every time I gave her something, she would shower me with love, with gratitude, with the breathless, adoring affection that was the only currency I truly craved. "Oh, Mommy, you're the best," she would squeal, hugging me, her expensive perfume mingling with the smell of yeast on my clothes. And that, I told myself, was worth the price. I was teaching her that my love was something to be celebrated. I didn't realize I was also teaching her that it was something to be consumed. She grew up to be a beautiful, charming, and utterly useless young woman. She had a degree in art history and a profound allergy to hard work. She flitted from one unpaid internship to another, always quitting when the work became too mundane. She saw a regular, 9-to-5 job as something for other, less special people. Her real job, as far as I could tell, was being beautiful, going to parties, and cultivating a circle of wealthy, influential friends. She lived in a beautiful apartment that I paid for. She drove a beautiful car that I paid for. She wore beautiful clothes that I paid for. She was a princess, and I, her mother, was her loyal and endlessly accommodating royal treasurer. Then came the groom, Bradley. Bradley was not a prince. He was the heir to a kingdom. His family, the Sinclairs, were old money. They owned half the commercial real estate in the city. They were powerful, they were respected, and they were, I would soon learn, deeply, profoundly, and snobbishly obsessed with class and appearances. Chloe, my ambitious social climbing daughter, saw Bradley as the ultimate prize, her golden ticket into a world she had always dreamed of belonging to. And she played the part of his perfect match with a brilliant, Oscar-worthy performance. She reinvented herself. The daughter of the baker became the daughter of a successful small business owner. My humble, hard-working life was repackaged into a quaint, charming story of entrepreneurial spirit. She hinted at a modest, but solid, family fortune. She learned to talk about art and wine and summers in the Hamptons. She was so convincing that she not only fooled the Sinclairs, she almost fooled me. When they announced their engagement, I was, of course, expected to pay for the wedding. All of it. It was a foregone conclusion, a discussion that was never even had. It was simply assumed that I, the loving mother, would provide the stage for my daughter's grandest performance yet. And so began the 9-month-long campaign of financial and emotional annihilation that was Chloe's wedding planning. The demands were breathtaking in their scale and their audacity. The wedding could not be at a simple church or a local hotel. It had to be at the Oak Terrace Country Club, the most exclusive and most expensive venue in the state. The guest list swelled to 300. The flowers had to be flown in from Europe. The band had to be a 10-piece orchestra. The champagne had to be Dom Perignon. With every new astronomical expense, Chloe would present it to me not as a request, but as a non-negotiable requirement of her new social standing. "Mom, we have to have the French champagne," she would say, her voice full of a desperate social anxiety. "The Sinclairs will notice if we serve them Prosecco. It would be humiliating." To fund this fantasy, I made the hardest decision of my life. I sold my bakery. The business I had built with my own 2 hands, the business that held the ghost of my husband and the story of my life. I sold it to a large commercial chain. The sale gave me a one-time substantial windfall. A fortune to me, but a fortune that was, I would soon discover, not nearly enough to satisfy my daughter's ambitions. I handed her the money. I transferred my entire life's work, my security, my future, into her bank account. It was a gift of such profound and foolish love that it still takes my breath away. I thought I was giving her the wedding of her dreams. I see now that I was just giving her the rope with which she intended to hang me. I did not realize, until it was too late, that I had made a critical mistake. I had paid for everything in advance, yes, but the final substantial payments for the venue, the caterer, the florist, and the band were all due on the night of the wedding itself. And in her haste, in her arrogant assumption of her own new wealth, Chloe had forgotten one small detail. The contracts, all of them, were not in her name. They were in the name of the person who had written the initial deposit checks. They were in the name of the person who was, at this very moment, sitting next to the garbage, with a checkbook in her purse and a heart full of ice. They were in the name of Beatrice Peterson, proprietor. The help. By Excel. I sat at table 42, an island of cold, calm fury in a sea of oblivious celebration. For a few minutes, I simply watched. I watched the spectacle I had paid for. I watched my daughter, Chloe, laugh with her new, powerful mother-in-law, a woman who probably believed I was back in the kitchen, washing dishes with the other hired help. I watched the waiters glide through the room, pouring champagne that cost $200 a bottle, a sum that would have taken me 3 full days to earn when I was starting my bakery. I watched the 10-piece orchestra playing a jaunty swing tune, their music a beautiful, expensive, and utterly meaningless soundtrack to a lie. Every clink of a glass, every peal of laughter, every note from the cello was a fresh insult, a new layer of salt being ground into the raw wound of my heart. But the pain was no longer a debilitating thing. It was a fuel. It was sharpening my mind, honing my resolve into a fine, dangerous point. I had spent my life building things. A business, a family, a future for my daughter. Now, I was about to discover if I was as good at demolishing things as I was at building them. I reached into my handbag and pulled out the worn, leather-bound folder. It was my wedding planner in a box, the folder that contained every contract, every receipt, every vendor's name and phone number. Chloe had laughed at me for being so old-fashioned, for keeping paper copies of everything. "Mom, it's all on the cloud," she had said with a dismissive wave of her hand. But I was a woman who believed in tangible things. And tonight, my old-fashioned, tangible pieces of paper were about to become her undoing. I stood up, my movements slow and unnoticed in my shadowy corner. I was invisible, just as she had wanted. The perfect position from which to launch a secret, devastating attack. I slipped over to the small wall-mounted service telephone, the one I had spotted earlier. I picked up the receiver, my back to the ballroom, and I began to dial. My first call was to the florist, a woman named Monique, whose bill for the thousands of white roses and towering centerpieces was a staggering $25,000. The final payment of $10,000 was due tonight. "Monique, darling," I began, my voice a perfect imitation of a flustered, panicked mother of the bride. "It's Beatrice Peterson, Chloe's mother." "Mrs. Peterson, is everything all right? Is the bride happy?" "The arrangements are beautiful, are they not?" "They are exquisite, Monique, truly. But we have a problem. A terrible, unforeseen problem. A financial catastrophe has just occurred. I am so sorry, but I will not be able to make the final payment tonight." The warmth in her voice vanished, replaced by a cold, professional chill. "Not be able to make the payment?" "Mrs. Peterson, our contract clearly states—" "I know what the contract states, Monique," I interrupted, my voice still a high-pitched, apologetic quaver. "And I will, of course, be liable for the full amount eventually. But as of this moment, my assets are frozen. I cannot pay you. So I am calling to give you an option. You can either leave the flowers here and wait for my lawyers to sort out this messy affair over the next few months, or you can retrieve your property, the property, as the contract also states, that still belongs to you until the final payment is made." There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her calculating. The loss of the final payment versus the loss of thousands of dollars worth of reusable vases, stands, and uncut, high-end floral stock. "My team will be there in 10 minutes, she said, her voice a clipped, angry whisper. And she hung up. I smiled. A small, grim smile. The first domino had been pushed. My second call was to the catering manager of the country club, a man named Jean-Pierre. I used the same panicked, apologetic tone. I spoke of the same unforeseen financial catastrophe. "So, Jean-Pierre," I concluded, "I'm afraid I must cancel the open bar. Effective immediately. From this moment on, it is to be a cash bar. And the final $50,000 payment for the food service, I am afraid that will have to be put on hold." Nasrin, the sputtering, apoplectic rage on the other end of the line, was a thing of beauty. He threatened lawsuits. He threatened to stop all food service. "You can do what you must, Jean-Pierre," I said, my voice full of a false, tearful resignation. "But I cannot give you money that I do not have access to. My advice to you is to start charging for the drinks. At least that way, you can recoup some of your losses." I hung up the phone, amidst a torrent of French cursing. The third, and final, call was to the leader of the 10-piece orchestra, a man named Julien. The conversation was much the same. A financial catastrophe, a frozen bank account, a profound and deeply insincere apology. "So, as of this moment, Julien," I said, "your services are, regrettably, no longer required for the remainder of the evening. The contract is cancelled. I am so terribly sorry." "But, madam," he protested, his voice a smooth baritone of disbelief. We have a contract until midnight. You do, Julian, I said. And I am sure my lawyers will be happy to discuss the cancellation fee with you at a later date. But as of right now, I cannot pay you for another minute of your time. So I would advise you to stop playing, pack up your beautiful instruments, and send me your final invoice. Nay. I placed the receiver back in its cradle. My work was done. My heart was pounding, a wild, frantic drum against my ribs. But my mind was a sea of calm, cold glass. I had just dismantled a $200,000 wedding with 3 phone calls and a lifetime of quiet, underestimated competence. I slipped back to my seat at table 42, the invisible old woman in the corner. And I waited for the chaos to begin. It started subtly. 2 men in dark uniforms entered the ballroom, their movements swift and purposeful. They began, with a quiet, ruthless efficiency, to dismantle the enormous floral arrangement in the center of the room. A few guests looked up, a flicker of confusion on their faces. Then the bar went quiet. A man in a tuxedo, a man I recognized as the groom's father, Mr. Sinclair, walked up to the bar to order another glass of scotch. I watched as the bartender shook his head and pointed to a small, hastily handwritten sign. Mr. Sinclair leaned in to read it. His face, which had been a mask of genial patrician amusement, turned a dark, ugly shade of purple. He pulled out his wallet, his movements stiff with outrage. The words spread through the room like a virus. It's a cash bar. Can you believe it? At a Sinclair wedding? But the final, glorious and undeniable note of doom came from the stage. The orchestra, which had been in the middle of a lively rendition of a Frank Sinatra classic, suddenly, abruptly, stopped. Mid-note. The silence that followed was a deafening, shocking void. And then, the sound of musicians packing up their instruments, the clatter of music stands being folded, the quiet, final click of a violin case being closed. The entire ballroom was now staring at the stage, their faces a sea of utter, baffled confusion. The party had died. The fairy tale was over. And the only sound in the room was the quiet, horrified whisper of 300 of the city's most important people asking the same question. What on earth is going on? I watched my daughter. She was standing by the wedding cake, her face a mask of pale, dawning horror. She looked at the disappearing flowers, at the closed-down bar, at the silent, empty stage. And then, her eyes, her wide, terrified, and finally, understanding eyes, swept across the room and found me. She looked at me, sitting in my dark corner, next to the garbage. And I looked back at her. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply met her gaze, my expression calm, my heart a cold, hard stone. And in my eyes, she finally saw not her mother, not the help, not the sweet, harmless old woman she had so easily discarded. She saw the woman who had signed the checks, the woman who had just called the tune. And she finally understood the true cost of her own cruel little joke. She finally understood that her perfect, beautiful, and very, very expensive party was over. The silence in the ballroom was a living, breathing monster. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of 100 canceled checks, with the deafening roar of a fairy tale collapsing in on itself. Chloe stood frozen, a statue of ivory and silk, her face a mask of utter, horrified disbelief. Her new husband, Bradley, rushed to her side, his own face a pale, confused mask. He looked from Chloe to the empty stage, to the furious, red-faced figure of his own father, who was now engaged in a heated, whispered argument with the catering manager. And then, Chloe moved. She began to walk towards me, not with the graceful, gliding steps of a princess, but with the stiff, jerky movements of a marionette whose strings had just been cut. She navigated the sea of confused, whispering guests, her eyes locked on mine. She looked like a woman walking to her own execution. She stopped at my table, at table 42, the table next to the garbage. She looked down at me, her beautiful face a ruin of shock and dawning, terrible comprehension. You, she whispered, her voice a dry, rasping thing. "You did this." I did not answer her. I just looked at her. I let her see the truth in my eyes. The truth she had refused to see for her entire life. The truth that my love and my money were not a bottomless, unconditional well. They were a resource she had just, with a single cruel and breathtakingly stupid act of disrespect, completely exhausted. Her new mother-in-law, a formidable woman with diamonds at her throat and ice in her veins, glided to her side. She looked at me, her eyes sweeping over my simple dress, my corner table, the nearby trash cans. And then she looked at her son's new, and suddenly very problematic, bride. "Chloe, darling," she said, her voice a low, dangerous purr. "Perhaps you could explain what is going on. It seems your family has had some financial difficulties." And in that moment, I watched my daughter's entire, carefully constructed world crumble to dust. The fairy tale was over. The princess was about to be revealed as a pauper. And the beautiful, glittering wedding she had sold her soul for was about to become the most public, most humiliating, and most expensive failure in the history of the Sinclair family. The aftermath was a swift, brutal, and deeply satisfying demolition. The wedding did not just end. It imploded. The Sinclairs, a family for whom public image was everything, were mortified. The story of the wedding where the band walked out, the bar shut down, and the flowers were repossessed mid-reception became the stuff of legend, a cautionary tale whispered in every corner of their privileged world. Chloe and Bradley did not go on a honeymoon to Bali. They went to their lawyer's office. The Sinclair family, with their army of ruthless attorneys, descended upon my daughter's life with the full force of their outraged pride. They did not want to be associated with a family that couldn't pay its bills, a family that created such a vulgar public spectacle. The marriage was annulled within a month. The beautiful fairy tale wedding, the one I had paid for with my life's savings, had lasted exactly 3 hours. My daughter, my Chloe, was ruined. She was a social pariah. The beautiful, powerful friends she had worked so hard to cultivate now crossed the street to avoid her. She was a punchline, a joke, a symbol of a social climbing ambition that had spectacularly and publicly failed. She was forced to move out of the lavish apartment I had been paying for. She was forced to sell the expensive car I had bought her. She was, for the first time in her life, utterly and completely on her own. And me? I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I felt a strange, quiet, and deeply profound sense of peace. The rage had burned itself out, leaving behind a clean, quiet, and blessedly empty space. I had spent my entire life building a future for my daughter. And in one swift and terrible night, I had taken it all away. I had not done it out of anger. I had done it out of a deep and deeply necessary love. A tough love. The kind of love that is willing to burn down a forest in order to save it. I took the money, the substantial sum that was left over from the sale of my bakery, the money that had not been consumed by the black hole of Chloe's wedding, and I bought a plane ticket. A one-way ticket to Italy, a country I had always dreamed of seeing, but had never had the time or the money to visit. I spent the next year of my life living for myself for the first time. I rented a small, sunny apartment in Florence. I learned to speak Italian. I took a cooking class. I walked through ancient streets. I looked at art that made my soul ache. I ate pasta that tasted of sunshine and history. I made friends. I became a person again. Not a mother, not a baker, not a royal treasurer. Just Beatrice. I did not speak to my daughter for that entire year. I sent her a single postcard, a picture of Michelangelo's David. On the back, I wrote 5 words. Sometimes you have to start over. The first time I heard from her was on the anniversary of the wedding. My Italian cell phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I answered it, and a quiet, hesitant voice said, "Mom?" It was Chloe. Her voice was different. The high, breathless, entitled cadence was gone, replaced by a low, quiet, and deeply weary humility. She did not apologize. She did not make excuses. She just said, "I got a job." "Oh," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "It's at a little bakery on the other side of town," she said. I'm washing dishes and learning how to knead dough. It's hard work." "Yes," I said. "It is." There was a long silence. And then she said the words I had waited a lifetime to hear. The words that were more valuable than all the designer dresses, all the fancy cars, all the French champagne in the world. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, her voice finally breaking. "I am so sorry for everything." So what is the final lesson from my fairy tale wedding that ended in a garbage fire? It is that love is not a blank check. It is a partnership, a sacred and often difficult dance of giving and receiving. For 40 years, I had been the only one dancing. I had been so desperate for my daughter's love, so addicted to her approval, that I had allowed her to believe that my role in her life was simply to be a resource, a bottomless well of money and support that would never, ever run dry. The greatest and most painful gift I ever gave her was the day I finally turned off the tap. I also learned that sometimes the most loving thing a mother can do for her child is to let her fail, to let her fall, to let her experience the cold, hard, and terrifying reality of a world without a safety net. I had spent my entire life trying to build a beautiful, perfect, and utterly false world for my daughter. A world where she would never have to know the fear of failure, the sting of rejection, the quiet, grinding exhaustion of hard work. And in doing so, I had almost destroyed her. I had raised a beautiful, useless, and deeply unhappy princess. It was not until I took everything away from her that I gave her the chance to become a person. My relationship with Chloe is a work in progress. I moved back from Italy a few months ago. I did not move back into my old life. I bought a small, simple condominium. I live a quiet life. Chloe and I see each other every Sunday. We do not go to fancy restaurants. We sit in my small kitchen, and she tells me about her week at the bakery. She tells me about the new bread recipe she is trying to master. She tells me about the difficult customer she had to deal with. Her hands are no longer perfectly manicured. They are often dusted with flour. And they are the most beautiful I have ever seen them. She is not a princess anymore. She is a baker. A baker who is slowly, painfully, and beautifully building a life of her own. A life that is not built on the shaky foundation of her mother's money, but on the solid, sturdy ground of her own hard work. And me, I am just a mother, watching her daughter, my daughter, finally grow up. Thank you for joining me on this journey. It has been a story of great foolishness, but also of a surprising and deeply satisfying wisdom. Your support has been a constant source of strength. If my story has moved you, or given you the courage to call your own piper, a like, or a subscription to Silent Grandma, would be a profound honor. Remember that your love is not a commodity to be bought and sold. It is a gift, a precious and a powerful gift, and it should be given only to those who are worthy of it. Be well and be wise. I'll see you in the next story. Love, Grandma Beatrice.